So I'm Ben, it's my RDO, and I'm in Castlemaine. Castlemaine's another lovely goldfields town in central Victoria. They're very similar to history to Bendigo, but a smaller town. Today we're going to show you 5 secret sites, historical sites, that are lesser known, don't get the same tourist attractions, don't get the same attention the other ones do. So this is 5 historic sites in Castlemaine you probably didn't know about. So my first site is this great big stone obelisk right at the top of Mostyn Street in Castlemaine. This was not like the London or Parisian ones stolen from the Egyptians. Castlemaine didn't have the resources to do this, but this was built for public subscription to celebrate what's become known as the Burke and Wills expedition, the death of Burke, Wills and Gray, and the survival of King. Burke was a resident of Castlemaine up until his selection for the expedition across Central Australia to the Gulf of Carpentaria, and it seemed he had an impact on this town, judging by the size of the monolith erected to remember him. Okay, so here's my 90-second explanation of the Burke and Wills expedition. Basically, a team of 19 men, a large collection of camels that were imported specially from India, horses, wagons, left Melbourne in August of 1860. They've travelled north, had a few teething issues. The horses didn't like the camels didn't like the horses. It was winter in Victoria, very muddy, very silty. The wagons kept breaking down, but they eventually got through and started working to routine, headed north. They've crossed the Murray River about Swan Hill and continued on north. Progress has been incredibly slow, but they've made their way north to a point known as Cooper's Creek. Now, Cooper's Creek had been charted about 15 years earlier by another explorer, Sturt. It was a known, reliable water source and a place where there'd be some grazing grass for the pack animals. So it was basically the furthest and most northern point they could reliably find water. The plan had been to set up a camp there and to stage an expedition north from there, then obviously head back to Cooper's Creek, replenish their supplies for the trip back to Melbourne. So, frustrated by their slow progress, Burke decides to head north with a very small light party with minimal equipment to try and make up some time. On the 17th of December, heading right into summer weather, which was probably ill-advised because the territory between him and the Gulf of Carpentaria was notoriously hot, frequently reaching temperatures up to 50 degrees Celsius. 4 men set out. Burke himself, Wills, the team navigator and third in command, Gray and King, who he deemed to be the fastest, fittest travellers. They've got with them 1 horse, 6 camels, and 3 months' worth of supplies. Burke instructs a man, Bray, who is left in charge of the camp at Cooper's Creek, to wait 3 months for them before departing and making their way south if they don't hear from them. Wills is much more conservative and cautious, and he secretly tells Brays they need to wait at least 4 months because he can't see the trip being done in 3. They leave and head for the north coast. The trip north actually isn't too bad for them and is largely uneventful. The weather's not too bad and not too hot. And they do reasonably well, but they do take some time. So in and around the 2nd of February, they're camping on what's the Baynoon River. And Wills notice that there's a tidal surge in the river. And so they know they're close to the Gulf of Carpentaria now. The territory ahead wasn't suitable for pack animals, so Burke and Wills have gone on ahead, left King and Gray with the pack animals and most of the supplies, and it's believed in around the 11th of February, they've sighted or reached the coast, with the assistance of some of the Aboriginal tribes locally who've shown them paths and ways through and helped them. They got back to the camp, and now they were in a pretty serious predicament. They had approximately 27 days of food left, and it had taken them 59 days to reach the Gulf. So they turn around in quick haste and start retracing their steps back. Unfortunately, the last top section of Australia is tropical and the monsoons come through almost immediately. The paths, the tracks become boggy, the rivers swell, progress becomes really, really slow. As they go on, they lose more and more of their food, they lose more of their equipment, the pack animals start to die or get eaten. The condition of their health deteriorates further and further and further. On the 8th of April, Gray's too weak to walk any longer. They stay with him till the 17th when he dies, and he's buried by the other three. And on the 21st of April, they arrive back at Cooper's Creek, only to discover that Bray's party have literally left that morning, abandoning the camp. Now, Bray's done his job. He's waited 18 weeks, having been told only to wait for 3. He's got to the point where their reserves of supplies of food were getting quite low. His men were starting to show signs of scurvy, and one of his party had a serious leg injury from a horse incident. There was no sign of a relief crew that was meant to have come through, so he could only assume that they weren't coming, and there was no sign of Burke and Wills. He's buried some provisions, and they've carved dig in English into a tree to keep it hidden at the site, and they've left. So there's some debate about what to do. Burke, Wills and King think about following the route they already know south, but think that Burke in particular thinks they're probably too weak. He pushes for a plan to head into the closest pastoral settlement, which is at an appropriately named location called Mount Hopeless in South Australia. It's approximately 240 kilometres away, and it's across the Strzelecki Desert, so it's not a simple task either. They make 2 attempts to try and get through to there, but are driven back for lack of water. In the process, they lose their last 2 remaining camels. Realising it was probably going to be impossible to get to Mount Hopeless, the 3 of them return to Cooper's Creek, and they wander around and make a few more attempts at gathering resources or looking for rescue. Eventually, the 29th of June, Wills is no longer able to walk. He's become too weak. He insists that Burke and King leave him and try and look for an Aboriginal camp or somewhere they can trade for some food. Burke and King's carry on for a couple of days, but 2 days later, Burke's also too exhausted and too fatigued to walk anymore. He dies the next morning in around the 30th of June. King's left with him, stays there for 2 days, unsure of what to do, heads back to try and find Wills, and when he does, Wills is already dead. King's left alone in Central Australia, the only survivor of the expedition to his knowledge. He finds 2 weeks' worth of flowers in an abandoned Aboriginal camp, and he lives off that for a little bit. Then he finds an Aboriginal clan who are actually happy to take him in and feed him and give him some shelter. In return, he would shoot some birds and supplement their food supply. He helped treat one of the women there who had a wound and became quite close to the group, and basically they've kept him alive. On the 15th of September, he's found by a rescue party, sole survivor of the expedition north. Between King's party, the relief party, and the search parties, 7 people lost their lives. But the state of Victoria was new, it was looking for an identity, it was looking for heroes, it was looking to people to champion, and the tragic story of this expedition sort of caught the public imagination, and particularly it seems in Castlemaine, where they built this magnificent, enormous statue for them. Anyway, back to your timeline. Okay, so item number 2, we deal with some historic stuff on this channel, but this is by far the oldest. It's not hundreds, it's not thousands, it's possibly millions of years old. May I present to you the anticlinal fold. Now, I'm not a rockologist, but what it says here explains a fair bit. It says anticlinal fold. This fine exhibit was disclosed when Lyttleton Street was being constructed in 1874. Saddle reefs occur in similar folds of the sandstones and slates in the lower geological horizons. The end of that sentence, I still don't know what's going on, but I'm told geologists get really excited about this, and it's quite a rare exhibit. So, number 2, the anticlinal fold. I'll put directions in the comments. Thank you. So, I'm just off the camp reserve in Castlemaine. This is the camp reserve down here. And in these goldfields town, wherever you see camp on a map, it usually talks about the government camp. So there's a Camp Hill in Bendigo, there's a Camp Street in Kangaroo Flat, and this is the camp reserve in Castlemaine. What would happen is, miners would come to the goldfields, they'd start digging, and the government would go, we've got something going on here, there's going to be a population here, there's got to be a town here, we better go organise something. And they would set up a camp, a government camp, and all the official administration came out of that. The policing, the settlement, the layout of lands, the civil engineering, all that stuff was planned there. And let's face it, it was also about taxing the miners. So This was where the initial government camp was, and this is where the first buildings were set up in Castlemaine. Over the road here, we've got the Castlemaine's courthouse. And we had, basically there was a timber lockup near here. Now, this is known as the prisoner tree, and what would happen here is when that lockup was full and they had more prisoners, they would literally just chain them to a great big chain that was around this tree, out in the elements, which obviously wasn't ideal in summer, winter, rain, night. Also probably not good for keeping them in prison either. Anyway, this was the prisoner tree. It's one very old tree. That is number 3. So I'm just out of Tewton in the bushlands at the back of Castlemaine, and this is the Garfield water wheel. So this was built basically to power a crushing quartz, which would have been over here, a stamping head. And if you have a look at it, and I'm not sure how well this comes up in the camera, this was absolutely enormous. So this slope here, the wheel sat inside this. If you think of the top there, way up there, as the halfway point of the wheel, this thing was absolutely enormous. So 72 feet in diameter, which you divide that by 3, you get meters. I'll put it on the screen. There's not much here left except for these impressive footings, foundations, but they're absolutely massive. Basically, if you're wondering what a water wheel is, essentially it's an engine. So it's designed to make rotational energy. You know, steam engines are expensive and hard to work, and if you haven't got to supply coal and the rest of it, what you can do, and you've got a supply of water, is run water over it. So the Expedition Pass Reservoir, which was in my first video, is around the corner, and part of its job was to supply water to keep this turning over here. The bigger the wheel, the more torque you have, the more engines you can turn. So this was quite an impressive feat in its time. So the Garfield water wheel makes site number 4. So the last one I've got for you, site number 5, is Welsh Village. Now this site's a little bit hard to get to. It's in a national park. You park where I am now, and there's about a kilometre's walk uphill over fairly rocky terrain. It's well worth it. If you bring kids, and I would encourage you to bring kids, just be mindful of where they are, especially if they're young. There's open mine shafts and some drop-offs all over this area. It's a hike of about 1 kilometre and it's a little bit steep. Now, Welsh Village was founded in the 1850s in the early mining days in around the Nimrod mine site, and the Nimrod mine was operational up until about the early 1900s. What we've got left is a stone remains of the huts in around the village. It's absolutely fascinating, well worth a visit. So that's site number 5, Welsh Village. Hope you enjoyed the video. There's a hiking trail that goes up to Welsh Village and continues around the back of the site, but I didn't end up doing it because I had run out of time on the day, but probably well worth a look, and maybe I'll go back another time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.